last time I alluded to the idea that there's a defense for people that may encounter kind of your sleep paralysis / abduction experience. I'm not here to make a judgment on that. I know a lot of skeptics are 100% convinced it's all internally psychological, and I guess I just don't care what they think. And my theory about skeptics versus people who are a lot more accepting of evidence, apparent evidence, and people who have had these experiences versus skeptics who either have had them and don't remember them, or somehow the experiences are locked away in a part of their memory where they will be upset and go nuts. So I want to share the experience that I had and what I found to work in stopping this experience once and for all. So I know there's people out there that have been traumatized and all this. So that's what this is for, to allow individuals that feel that, you know, there's no one really to turn to, and that there's nobody really that is there to help them, to give them a little defense. It's almost like Hogwarts defense against the dark arts, because whatever this situation is a dark type of situation. I don't know what else to categorize it as, but it seems to be a human experience, and a lot of people have done, you know, have talked about this in one form or another. And the thing is before I ever heard of Whitley Strieber, there were people that I knew that had seen weird things that I trusted implicitly, and I had had some strange encounters that all I could say is there was definitely a presence in the room that was not my own. So, with that, let me go ahead and relay the first experience that I had. And I was in Pensacola, which is significant because of it's right next to Gulf Breeze, and there's a whole history of Gulf Coast, Pensacola, and Gulf Breeze encounters and sightings, but this is specifically mine. So it was in the 90s now. I want to say 93, perhaps, and I was renting an apartment on Bayou Tahar, which is a body of water in Pensacola that's kind of famous. That's not significant. Well, it might be significant because there is footage, old video footage, of a very interesting light show / craft that the owner of the house that I was renting an apartment from had taken, and I have not yet seen that footage, and I'm not even sure if it exists anymore. You need to understand Pensacola and the people there. They tend to worry a lot about what others think of them. It's very southern. It's very patriarchal. It's very nepotistic. I'm making up words. There's a lot of nepotism in the city. So to come out and admit that you have video of something like that could socially and economically be the kiss of death for you in that town. So I'm in Denver now. I can give a fuck what anybody in Pensacola thinks of me, other than my family. So anyway, I woke up one night with a massive amount of fear. I was laying on my back and I couldn't breathe, which was weird. I was having a hard time breathing. And I was only about 10 feet away from the front door to this apartment. It was like a semi-basement apartment, and I was sleeping in kind of the basement area, and as the ground sloped, there's your door, and I'm about 10, 12 feet away from that, maybe more like 15 feet away. And as I'm sitting there in this paralyzed condition in fear, and my eyes are open, by the way, I can see out of my peripheral and feel these, well, just your classic gray alien type of little creatures. But the interesting thing is that they were moving really, really fast, as in like if you fast forwarded a video, that's how they were moving, that fast. So, but they were kind of stuck at that door, like they couldn't, there was something challenging about that door. And then as I realized them and realized this fear is what I did to defend myself is when I was 13 years old, I took Tai Chi with my father and had been into meditation and Tai Chi and kind of that energy building. So this gets a little esoteric, which is again why I could give a fuck what skeptics think, because anything that's not empirical science to them doesn't matter. And I don't think that's true, because when you have observers, I think that observation is evidence if in fact that person is reliable. Say a pilot. At the time I was an ex-Marine forward observer / water safety survival instructor. And forward observers, what that means, well, I wasn't technically a forward observer. I had participated in forward observer exercises, so I'd learned that job pretty much, the basics. I wasn't an expert at it, but I was pretty good at it. And interestingly enough, which I also think damns skeptics about observers, is that if you're in Anglico and you learn things about forward observers, you get a deck of cards with all the NATO and Warsaw packed airplanes in silhouette, profile, and plan view on a deck of cards, and that helps you identify things. So pretty well trained, pretty good at, figuring stuff out and looking at machines. So, when a pilot tells me something, or if I see something, I tend to believe it. So anyway, this experience, these things were moving around really fast, and I went back to this Tai Chi training where you focus all of your attention just below your belly button, which is like your chi. And when I did that, I kind of felt a shift, break a little bit out of that fear, and I actually was able to take in a little bit of a breath. And then I just imagined just a burst of light coming from that chi center and enveloping my whole body. And as it did, I felt this warmth pass over my body. And then whatever those things were at the door, as that I expanded this light out into my whole apartment, then I saw myself above the house where I was at, the apartment, and that light expanding to the whole block. And as I was doing that, I felt those little gray guys just go away really fast. They couldn't stand that. So it's very interesting if you've ever studied metaphysics. A guy named Stuart Wilde used to get himself into these etheric trances and actually kind of attack these ghoul-type creatures in sort of this, alternate universe or alternate dimension kind of reality he was able to perceive. Now, is there a little bit of, make-believe in some of the stuff this guy wrote? Perhaps, but I could tell from my experience of repelling whatever this dark fear thing was, that it did not like whatever this ki energy was, this chi energy. So it really lends itself a lot to the ancient wisdom traditions of, good and evil, dark and light, angels and demons. So that's kind of a component that I know skeptics aren't willing to go to, because it brings an element of metaphysics to the whole subject, which I know they don't like and don't understand. And my thing about skeptics is, I think there's certain people like myself that are sensitive to what we would call a sixth sense. I've always have been. When I was young, my father got me into meditation at 7 years old, and I was able to start seeing auras around people very easily. And when you're a kid, it's a lot easier when you're 7 years old. But I could see colors, blue and whatnot. And now I really have to concentrate just to see just a clear kind of aura, and there's hardly ever any color involved. And I just think that's part of, when you grow up, you get more pulled into this reality domain and less, there's a lot of, I had a kid once tell me what the dessert special was when I was waiting tables out in California. And it was one of those kind of indigo children type people. I would assume that, the mom said, yeah, she does that all the time. So there's definitely that element of humanity that I think science has negated and poo-pooed, whereas in the old kind of shamanistic tribal traditions, the shaman or the big man was your authority. So I think these perceptions of the sixth sense type thing are valid when you think of it in terms of tribal, and if you use science to explain everything, you're going to have a lot of unexplained things in your life. So anyway, and it's also fear. People can't live in a world where there's unknowns because they live in fear, and that freaks them out. So on to the next experience. Had another one in Cantonment. Now at the time, I had not really been into practicing anything with meditation or anything, and I was kind of breaking myself down a little bit. What I mean by that, I was drinking a lot, and when you see an alcoholic, you can almost see the way that alcohol energy has kind of got that guy, and I've always been able to kind of feel that and just decide, I'm not going to drink this next day because I don't want this thing to get its tentacles in me, this addictive thing that seems to be on some people. But this particular point of my life, I was pretty rudderless and not really very happy at all. So anyway, this encounter that I had this time was a lot more invasive. And again, it was night terrors. I woke up on my stomach, and the high-speed motion little guys were in the front door of my parents, but inside in that front hallway, moving around real fast. And I had the sensation of a very large entity on my back, and the impression I got was that kind of lizard type of creature, big, tall, kind of lizard type of being that people said that they've seen or whatever. And I never actually saw it, but I could hear an evil laugh, in that it was, whatever this entity was, it was enjoying my fear and my terror. And I heard this kind of laugh. And when I heard that, I remembered, this thing doesn't know what it's fucking with. I have this secret weapon, this chi thing. So I immediately just exploded a burst of light from that chi center, and I blew that son of a bitch up through the ceiling and gone. And that's all kind of an etheric perception. And then I woke up and, I was sweaty and all this, and all the classic type of symptoms. So, now those are all easily debunked by a skeptic. I don't care. That's my personal experience. But I want you to note that both times I used that inner energy, that esoteric Qigong practice to negate whatever this negative encounter was. So I think that's very significant for people out there that are experiencing these night terrors. Even if there really is nothing to it, it's a good way to get out of the night terror, is focusing down there. And, for all I know, if you want to go purely scientific and skeptic, perhaps it's an electromagnetic reaction with your nervous system, and that's how you're able to overcome those dreams. I don't know. But I'm just telling you what my experiences are. Anybody wants to expound on that, about what really happened, or call me a liar, or tell me I'm hallucinating. That's my favorite thing about skeptics, is that they'll just simply negate, like a pilot or a scientist or an army guy or a security patrol in the Air Force. Those guys guard nukes. Do you really think they hire people for that job that just fucking hallucinate for no reason? Now, granted, also in the military, there is something called BZ gas, which is airborne LSD. And who knows if sometimes that stuff gets out and people just trip balls. Mass hallucination, that's how you would do it. So, the other encounter that I had was not a sleeping thing like this. At this point, I had thought that I had kind of beat these things and had essentially let them know I'm not to be visited at night. So, when I first was married, before I was married, I was dating the woman that was going to be my wife. I'm divorced now, but we had an encounter in her apartment where there was a dark kind of voice over our bed, and I did the same kind of chi burst thing and blew that thing away too. And that was an old creepy house in Pensacola anyway. So I'm not exactly sure what this interdimensional thing is, but there's been a lot of illusions in science fiction. There was one on Star Trek Next Generation, there was one in Star Trek Voyager, and there's been a whole story arc in Doctor Who with the silence, and those things actually even kind of look like those alien gray things. And that's what they did. They ate fear and all this. So, and by the way, I do have a strong intuition, a strong feeling that whatever those things are that feed on fear and terror and pain and suffering, whatever those things are in retreat and are hurting, because more of us are waking up and know how to defeat them. Or at least, I think once you're aware of them, that's half the battle. And then knowing that Qigong type of energy control to repel them is something people should understand. So, I guess I should say that I did have the one more kind of psychic experience or Qigong type. But we weren't asleep at that time. We were awake. And both of us could feel that presence of something. But the weird thing about that night is that presence was directly over us. And again, I got rid of it. So, with that Qigong burst is what I call it. Which actually I learned from a manga comic. I'd always known that that's where your chi center was, but I saw a manga comic where this girl was surrounded by monsters, and she just, and just expanded this big chi ball of light, and it just melted all the bad guys. So that's where I got the idea, and I just copied that, and you can feel that actually worked. So thank you, animator, whoever did that one. So, okay, this waking experience I had at the time, I was at Stennis Space Center, and I was working for the National Data Buoy Center, but Stennis Space Center is also where they used to test the shuttle rockets. They mount it to a big frame and fire them off. It was 6 miles away, and when they fired the motors, we'd lay on the ground and get a back massage. That's how powerful the motors were. But big, heavy double doors going into this main contractor's building, and I mean, like, you really had to pull them. That really, it had the foyer, so you could wipe your feet off and then go into the building. And so as I was walking out one day to go to lunch or wherever I was going, this little man pulls open the door and walks through the foyer and he must have been about 3'8", or maybe 4 feet. But he was really tiny, and he wasn't a dwarf. Everything about him was proportionately small, like a small man, and he had very sharp elven kind of features, and he just looked like if you put him in a leprechaun outfit, this guy could have made a lot of money showing up to places to be a leprechaun or whatever. And he had this really intense look on his face. And I was so blown away by just looking at him that at first I didn't. It was like no problem. And then when I go to open the second outside door, I realize how heavy the door is. And I turn around and he just opens the door, no problem, and walks in and takes a right. And I walked outside and thought about it, and I went right back inside, which it was just a whole room full of cubes where engineers would do whatever they did for the National Data Movie Center. And the only way he could have gone, I walked that way and looked down this long hall of cubes, and he wasn't there anymore, and I walked down that hall of cubes and offices and looked in every one of them and didn't see him. So that was strange, and the reason that's strange is I don't really hold a lot of stake in Whitley Strieber as far as, well, ever since he got involved with Art Bell, I suppose I've kind of had a bad opinion. Not a bad, but a less of opinion about Strieber. But I met him, and he seemed really, he met him years ago at a UFO conference in Mobile, and he seemed pretty normal, like a dude. I mean, you know, this is when I was starting to learn about this stuff and hadn't had some of these experiences I'm talking about yet. So, but talking to him, I asked him, I was actually working for a paper at the college I was going to at the time, and I asked him, what's the strangest thing that you ever saw? And he talked about a little man that was in his bed and that was in his house and would evade him like that and go around the corner and he couldn't see him, but it was a little tiny man like I just seen. So that's what freaked me out about that. I don't know who or what that guy was, but you know, where do those little legends of leprechauns and elves and fairies and all come from? So do interdimensional beings sometimes manifest themselves as people, as little tiny leprechaun, elf-looking dudes? I really don't know. Now, I don't remember not if he had pointy ears, but I do not think he did, or I think I would have stopped right there. But to this day, I always, you have regrets in life, and what I regret is that I did not kneel down and put my hand out and stop him and say, who are you? Because that's about how tall he was. Like, I'm almost 6 foot tall, but if I'd taken a knee, we would have been eye to eye. That's how tall this guy was. So, 3 and change, you can see why I'm not even really putting him past 4 feet. So he's a very tiny guy. And if I could weigh him, I would say if he weighed 60 pounds, I would have been, wow, he's kind of dense. Because he was really, really small, really tiny, like maybe 40 pounds. Like a child. Like he was built like a 7-year-old child. That's about how big he was. So, that was a weird one. And at the time, that contractor, they're getting ready to do the laser test out there at Stennis Space Center for the space laser and all this. So, who knows, on a military base where there are weapons being tested that you can fire in space, who knows what sort of, Gary 7 kind of agents are there for the sake of, whatever is out there that we don't know of. Gary 7's a reference to an old Star Trek episode where this agent from the future comes and averts a nuclear war on Earth, which is an awesome Star Trek episode. The original series, by the way. Rest in peace, Leonard Nimoy. So, that's kind of all I have. Oh, one more encounter that I had. I had gotten into, metaphysics and all this, and there was a bit of a time in my life, well, I guess I still do it a little bit, but where you practice cloud bursting, which is, really esoteric and airy-fairy, but it makes sense. It's mind over matter, because all you're doing is having some water vapor kind of move. You're essentially dissipating a little bit of water vapor with thought. And, that gets into a whole skeptic thing I'm not even going to touch. People that are into metaphysics don't even believe it. But for me, it was always a mind over matter experiment. So anyway, one day I was doing this experiment in Louisiana on a small stationary cloud, maybe about, as like if you held up your thumb away from your hand at arm's length. So if this cloud was a little round puffy thing about as big as your thumbnail, that's about, how big it was. So I decided, well, this is a little bigger than I normally do, but I'm going to go ahead and cloud bust this. And as I did, something shot out from it. And it was a pink jellyfish looking thing that left the cloud that I was attempting to burst esoterically, and it went into a bigger one. And it was this translucent plasma pink jellyfish thing, but the tentacles were really thick. It wasn't like, there was like maybe 10 to 12 really thick fingery kind of tentacles, and it just kind of went into another cloud. And that, I told my wife at the time about that, and she wasn't really impressed by this at all. Probably thought I was going nuts. Granted, she had a lot of crazy, wild, esoteric experiences herself. But, so, perhaps whatever this human energy is, this chi energy, that's all connected, by the way, that qigong energy and that cloud bursting energy and the healing energy, anything people do with their intentionality is all connected to that. But my thought was, whatever these things are, maybe some of them aren't like what we think of as aliens. Maybe some of them are terrestrial creatures that exist in a reality where, well, maybe they're just really sensitive to chi energy or this kind of electromagnetic field that empirical science doesn't hold any value with. But this is interesting for people that meditate or into metaphysics, that whatever this thing was, it didn't like the cloud bursting energy. It moved away. It was like, I gotta get away from that. So that's interesting, and that also, I think, lends credibility to when I repelled whatever those things were with the chi energy. And then to add to that, I kind of stopped dead one day when I saw an illustration of a pink jellyfish type thing that was grabbing a cow, and it was this very dramatic image, but it was an artist rendition of a story of something someone said they had seen. And I just think that's bizarre that I had seen this pink jellyfish thing, and then years later I see this illustration of where this pink jellyfish thing is abducting a cow. So makes sense that there could be creatures in the stratosphere that are organized, intelligent plasma, and then that's a very basic kind of shape, like a hydra, something with tentacles that can interact with the outside world and pull things towards it. I really don't know. The weirdest theory I've heard of is these are an artificial intelligence left over from a society or a civilization on Earth that wiped itself out. That's interesting and very science fiction-y. Who knows? But regardless, whatever these things were, and all this stuff is to say this: if you're having negative experiences with the night terrors / abductions, whatever you want to call it, dark entities, I would learn about Qigong and learn about transcendental meditation and create your own mythology, create your own, don't give in to any guru bullshit. I really don't like the Stephen Greer thing and all that. It just seems very cult-like. Don't give in to any cult-like, and even some of these UFO. In fact, I don't go to the UFO conventions anymore. I found them to be also very. There's like a baseline for what they'll accept, and the other thing is I've told several of those UFO researchers some of my stories, especially the one on the East Coast, and nobody's ever wanted to research anything that I've encountered, and I don't think that that's. It just seems suspicious to me that they keep rehashing the same old things over and over and over, trying to really push that Rendlesham thing, or really push Roswell, or, there's a few encounters they really, really want to push, but individuals with lifetimes of experiences, or really strange experiences like I told you, sometimes are negated. Granted, there's a lot of researchers out there. I appreciate Friedman, Richard Dolan. There's some other guys out there I really think are awesome. I can't think of their names now. And I don't get me wrong, I do appreciate these military people that come forward and talk about Rendlesham. I'm not negating that, what happened there. I'm criticizing the researchers that keep only wanting to focus on that same thing over and over and over. I mean, honestly, my experiences, I've had so many experiences, and that's why I'm recording them here. I want to do this before I get too old and forget. And I always said I would do this, and now's the time. But honestly, I think I've had enough encounters to where you could just do a whole special on, on just me, which seems kind of arrogant, but honestly, I've got a lot of really valid experiences in my mind and a lot of good points, and hopefully the bottom line is, again, I'm going to reiterate this, I just want to help people that maybe are out there not knowing what the hell's going on, not knowing how to deal with it, and every time you go to bed you have that dread of something's going to happen. Now, I never had that dread, but based on my first video where I talked about how the kids and the parents separated, and I've heard that before, and it just seems very strange to me that, wow, there's a UFO treetop level above our houses. Yeah, kids yawn, get bored, go to bed. I mean, it's not like a circus like you would think it would be. So that to me seems like a little mind manipulation there. That's all I have. I am going to get back in to this next time and talk about some other Marines that have told me experiences, very high-ranking Marines, and I'll leave it at that. So thanks a lot. This is the UFO Experience. If any of this helps you, share it. Give the thumbs up, retweet, whatever it takes. Get these stories out there. Hopefully, my experiences are going to help somebody somewhere. And I strongly feel this whole disclosure thing is an individual disclosure. You need to disclose to yourself. So, one last thing I want to leave everybody with. Years ago, there was an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation called Night Terrors that was a blow-for-blow classic abduction scenario, and they even went into the holodeck and everybody recreated by their memory the accounts of what this abduction room looked like. It was circular, there was a table in it with an arm and a kind of a scissor looking thing with like a saw and on, like a jagged edge thing. But when I saw that, it looked very familiar. The whole scenario seemed very familiar to me. And the very next day, this is why this is significant. The very next day in the Pensacola News Journal, there was an article about Ya Big, maybe 2 paragraphs long, on page 8 of the front page section, back where they just put a bunch of crap. And it said that the United States government and the U.S. Navy are letting civilians know about aliens through Star Trek The Next Generation. And I thought that was really interesting. And then there's a line that Jonathan Frakes says right before they go to commercial in that episode, when they all see this chair and this saw thing in the holodeck. And they don't really repeat that episode very much, by the way. But first Commander Worf says, "I've been here." And then Jonathan Frakes, with that just classic bearded, serious face, goes, "We've all been here." And I think that's interesting. And then the next day, to have that article come out in the news, and then let me add some emphasis to that, when I was a technical illustrator in Pensacola, I had a naval officer who had been in intelligence tell me that the media is used to help society get ready for different stages of societal evolution. So paradigm shifts and whatnot. Now, granted, I do believe as a race we've rejected the alien invasion scenario. Time and time again, those movies come out and people reject them and don't go to them and say, screw you. Independence Day was probably the first big revamp of that. And me and my friends thought it was crap for a lot of reasons, continuity errors being one. But at that time, we had already decided that the invasion scenario was wrong, and that, in fact, is what we have is more of a personal encounter scenario. And I'm not going to get into whatever the motivations are of what these encounters are. I don't know. I tend to agree that there's a kind of a feeding thing going on there where they're pulling energy from you and utilizing that as food. And that's also come out in that was my intuition initially. And then you also have heard that in researchers and also in the entertainment industry as far as motivations for villains to eat. And then the other thing is that as far as encounters with positive beings, I also think that once you learn to negate those negative encounters, that you automatically just start to draw more positive type of etheric experiences into your life, or at least by negating the negatives, you open yourself up to more positive reality. In so much as I do not think that those things are anywhere around me anymore, but sometimes you can tell that there's like a dark energy kind of coiled around an alcoholic, or you get a dark feeling from somebody and you can kind of sense that intentionality. Maybe that's just a product of the Qigong, the meditation, I'm not sure. Anyway, hopefully these stories help you. This was an extremely long one, and it wasn't intended to be so, but it is important for people to understand these things. If you're having those dark experiences and there's no way out, and empirical science is just telling you, yeah, you're nuts and sleep terrors, but you know in your heart it's more. So I hope that helps. Thank you, and you can subscribe and give me the thumbs up to the UFO Experience.